event is focusing particularly on the Sikh community to look at the Sikh religion, culture, heritage and tradition. I think this is a very important event for the purpose of actually promoting the various aspects of a minority community. The Sikhs number about 12,000 to 15,000 in Singapore. We are basically seen as a minority within a minority community. So it becomes very important for us to keep promoting ourselves, to keep creating the awareness, to keep creating the understanding of the Sikh community to the wider society. So today's event, which encompasses a various aspects of the Sikh community, provides simply that opportunity for all of us to better understand the Sikhs and the way we live our life in Singapore.
The Sikhs have got a lovely, vibrant, colorful culture. And this is showcased in their lovely thread work that the ladies are famous for in their fulkari thread work that they call. Fulkari patterns are used on not only scarves, our Punjabi suits, as well as on our handheld fans as well. And this can be showcased in the lovely fans, and the mirrors are used to make it look even more beautiful. Other than that, the Sikh culture, the Sikh people are very good carpenters. You can see the intricate woven of the stands of the bed. This is a small replica of an Indian bed. For the bed, they make daris, which is the bed sheet and the covering for the bed. Everything is handmade in Punjab by the Sikhs. This is a typical cross-stitch bed sheet that you can see, and this is also done by the woman. The women of Punjab, the Sikh women, are very talented. All their hobbies and free time is basically to do embroidery and stitch work. Other than that, they also showcase their embroidery on shoes as well. And the other thing that they are talented in Punjab is for their copper and their utensils. For example, we have got, this is a typical pan that we have for cooking, but you can see it's made all of copper. Even for milking the cows and using pails in India, we also have it made out of copper. So this showcases that the Sikhs have got a very vibrant and a very colorful heritage that they can showcase. There is a lot more to it, but this is just a very small aspect of it that I am showcasing today.
Gatka is a Sikh martial art. In this Gatka, we use different kind of weapons. It is not to attack somebody, it is to defend ourselves and to others. The basic name or the first name was Gatka started from this stick. Whenever we used to play with the stick, so to save and to practice, so this is called Gatka. But now we have different kind of all the weapons named Kirpan and Chakkar and other things also part of the Gatka. So this is the dress code for the army, for the Khalsa. It is very important and necessary. We need to keep it. All the baptized Sikhs, all the Khalsa Sikhs, they keep Kirpan always with them.
Today I'm going to talk about the sweets of Punjab. We have so many kinds, but today it is limited to 3 types. We have, for example, for wedding. During weddings, these are the two kinds that are served during weddings. They are called laddus and the bundi. Now this is like a sign of gratitude, meant to show happiness. Some sweetmeats that are served during festivals, like for example Diwali. Diwali we serve, this is quite common and it is easily made. This is called sakar pare, and we have the barfis. We have two types of barfis. We can either make it with milk or we use the gram flour and then put some syrup in it. So this is done during festivals. It is served during festivals. Then we also have certain desserts that are quite common. For example, this is called gulab jamun. This is actually has a Persian origin. Okay, and this is called jalebis, sweet also. And then another thing that's quite famous and which has been seen many years ago is called for health, it's called panjiri, with all the herbs and all the spices that's good for our health.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I am Gurminder Singh. I am here to introduce about Gurmat Sangeet. So Gurmat Sangeet means the Sangeet, the music suggested by our Guru Sahibans. So it started with Guru Nanak Dev Ji, the first Guru of Sikhs. So Bhai Mardana Ji, his companion, used to play the rabab, this instrument rabab. So we are singing the kirtan, the hymns with this instrument.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Today we will be telling you about the 5 kakars, the items that Sikhs need to wear after they are baptized into the Khalsa, the Brotherhood of the Pure.
Thank you, Jab. So what we have here is Jab wearing some of the 5 kakars, but please allow me to walk you through each of them. Why are they called the 5 Ks? Because in the Punjabi language, they start from the letter K. So if I can bring your attention here, first of all, we have the hair. You might have many Sikh friends who have got unshorn hair, the guys and the girls, right? And that's one of the reasons why when you get baptized, you actually keep the hair as a gift from God and you keep it unshorn. Next, we go on to the kachera. The kachera is actually a pair of underpants or boxers that you wear. Is to keep pure and always to remind you to always keep yourself for self-control. Very important in the good old days as well when you take part in battles where you always kept covered regardless of the battle. The next is a kara. You might have a lot of Sikh friends also wearing the kara, like a steel bangle. Now the steel bangle always reminds you to do right and to do what's important in life, right? So it gives you that sense of self-restraint as well.
It also reminds you that God is everywhere at once.
Thank you, Jack. And we have the kirpan. Kirpan is very important. So all Khalsa are actually, so this is the kirpan. And what happens is not to attack, but it's always to defend the truth and to defend the oppressed. A very important role that the Khalsa plays from history and even up till now. And last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, we have the kanga. The kanga, we have our hair to keep ourselves neat. So all of us wear a kanga as well. And it's a small comb to keep neat and always be ready for action anytime. This is our battle order, the basics you need to always be ready to serve humanity and to serve the community. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa.
Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed a little snippet of what I had to offer. Later on, what we're going to do, you're going to be experiencing more of these pulsating beats that you just heard. This is called the dole. The dole is a North Indian instrument. It's made of wood. To be exact, it's made from the thick wood, the tali wood also. It's got 2 sides to it, the bass side and the treble side. The bass side is made from goat's hide and the treble side is made from western fiber skins. Right? The bass side is struck by this stick called the daga, and then it's hit like that. And and then the tribal side is struck by this tiny little stick. It's called the tilli, and this is the sound it gives you. The toll was used to pass messages from one town to another town back in those days, in the olden days when the bandits used to attack a particular town. So town A would be attacked by the bandits. One of the townsmen from the town will play the dole to warn town B that, hey, we are being attacked by bandits. So you watch out, you be careful, stay armed, and get ready before they come attack you too. So today, the dole is used for more energetic dance performances to create the extra flavor in the whole event that you have. So together with the Bhangra and the dole, this is what our whole Punjabi Sikh culture is all about. And then later on, you're going to be hearing more Bhangra, you're going to be hearing more of the dole. So check this out. Take care.
Today's event is jointly organized by the Centre for Singapore Tamil Culture, the National Library Board, Singapore Khalsa Association, Sikh Advisory Board, and the Young Sikhs Association Singapore. The curator of today's program is Mr. Harnak Singh, the president of the Singapore Khalsa Association and a prominent leader of the Singapore Sikh community. And this program would not be possible without the partnership of the many other dedicated individuals from the community. Now, before we begin, it's important to answer a question that might be on your minds. What is the Centre for Singapore Tamil Culture doing organizing an event on the Singapore Sikhs? Well, that's precisely one of CSTC's two-pronged mission. One is to gain a deeper and a more robust understanding of the Tamil culture in Singapore. The second is to build bridges across Singapore's cultures so that each of us have a better appreciation of each other's culture. Today's event is an intercultural one. At the end of the event, we hope all of us can walk away with a deeper understanding of the Singapore Sikhs, the whats, the whys, and the hows behind the Singapore Sikh culture and practices, as well as form firm friendships between the Singapore Sikhs and Singapore Tamils, Indians, the Chinese, Malays, and every culture that we have here. Without further ado, let's kick off today's special evening. We begin our program with a spirited dole performance. From being a tool to warn villagers of bandit attacks to a pulsating rhythmic instrument with Western elements, the dole is characterized by its large size and thunderous sound, and it's often played at lively celebrations including weddings, festivals, and Bhangra performances, infusing energy and rhythm into the festivities. A round of applause for performers from the Singapore Dole Squad. pleasure to introduce Mr. Harnack Singh, the President of the Singapore Khalsa Association. Professionally, he is the Deputy Director of the Institute of South Asian Studies and has more than 30 years of experience in government and non-government organizations, business sector, and academia. He was also the founding president of the Young Sikh Association Singapore. On behalf of all the partners of today's event, I invite Mr. Singh to deliver the welcome address and to introduce the distinguished keynote speaker. Mr. Singh, please.
Thank you very much. Very good evening, Professor Tan Tayong, President, Singapore University of Social Sciences, and Chairman, Institute of South Asian Studies, NUS. So you know who my boss is. Distinguished panelists, friends, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's event titled Singapore Sikhs. The event has been put together by 5 partner organizations, as the MC had mentioned just now: Center for Singapore Tamil Culture, Singapore Khalsa Association, Sikh Advisory Board, National Library Board, and Young Sikh Association Singapore. Some 7 months ago, my good friend Arun Mahinan approached me with the idea of doing an awareness event on the Sikh community. CSTC had done a similar event on the Malayali community a few months earlier. He thought he could sweeten the deal and win me over by buying me a good, nice Indian breakfast and some chai. The chai was the one that stole the deal. But to be very honest, he did not require a lot of convincing. In fact, required no convincing at all, because we felt, that this is an important event. So the moment the idea was broached to the Sikh Advisory Board and Young Sikh Association Singapore, they readily agreed to be partners in this endeavor. In Singapore, as you would know, that the Sikh community is in fact a minority within a minority Indian community. However, despite numbering about 12,000 to 15,000, Singapore Sikhs have traditionally been punching well above their weight and making significant contributions to the socio-economic and political landscape of the country. We have been remarkably visible in many strata of Singapore society. Having said that, it is important for us as individuals and as a community to continue being visible, to remain relevant, and to contribute to Singapore's development. So initiatives such as this, therefore, are important, as they provide the opportunity for our community to highlight the various aspects to the wider Singapore society. Today's event provides the opportunity for the Sikh community to share the various aspects about ourselves. Who are the Sikhs? What are the core tenets of Sikhism? What are the essential practices and daily conduct of the Sikhs? What is the Sikh culture, heritage, and tradition? What takes place in the Gurdwara, or the Sikh place of worship? And what are the ideas behind the langar, which is a community meal? So these are just some of the questions that will be answered this evening. We hope that you will be enriched by the discussions and through the viewing of the exhibition panels and the exhibition booth that we put together. We've also prepared a special meal from the Gurdwara for all of us. Of course, we have the booth on turban tying for those who are keen to have a turban tied on them, and I see the business for that particular booth has been quite brisk, right? So at this juncture, I honestly would like to take the opportunity to thank all the partners. In fact, Arun and his team for approaching us and helping and guiding us in terms of organizing this event. So it is not fair to say I'm the curator of the event. There are many curators, there are many partners, many volunteers who have come together to put this event for all of us. So I would like all of you to just join me in thanking all of them for doing a wonderful job. Thank you. It now leaves me to do a very important task, and quite a difficult one as well, is to introduce the keynote speaker for this evening. Like I say, Professor Tan is my boss at ISAS, but more importantly, he's also a beautiful and wonderful mentor. I've known him, and he always scolds me for that. I've known him since I was undergraduate in NUS, not too long ago. Yeah, as mentioned just now, Professor Tan is the president of the Singapore University of Social Sciences, the second president, right? Before he joined SUSS, Professor Tan was president Yale and US College. Prior to that, he held various academic and leadership appointments at the National University of Singapore. Professor Tan is also the chairman of the Institute of South Asian Studies at NUS. He is also a member of the National Library Board and the National Heritage Board. Professor Tan was a nominated Member of Parliament from 2014 to 2015. He was awarded the National Day Administration Silver Award in 2009 and the Public Service Award in 2020. So we have in our midst, and we call him an honorary Sikh because his knowledge of the Sikh community will put people like me to shame. His knowledge is extremely deep and has a lot of insightful views on the Sikh community. If you have the chance, afterwards, we have a copy of his book on the Singapore Khalsa Association, which was his honours thesis in NUS. Right? Professor Tan is a graduate of NUS. He completed his doctorate at Cambridge University. He specializes in South and Southeast Asian history and has published extensively on the history of India and Singapore. So it gives me great pleasure and a wonderful privilege to invite Professor Tan to deliver his keynote address. Professor Tan, please.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Henrik, for that very kind introduction, some of which I don't think is entirely true, especially the part where I have very, very deep knowledge of the Sikh community. I've been very interested in the community for many years. I've done some work, some research, but I don't claim to be a true expert. I'm still learning in the true spirit of a Sikhi, where you learn and you try to grow. And this is where I think there's lots that we can learn from each other in this process of discovery. Henrik and I go a long way back. I think he was one of my first students when I was appointed at the National University of Singapore to teach the history of India. At that time, not many students wanted to do the history of India. I recall everybody wanted to study American history, European history, Japanese history. But I thought that the subcontinent was a very important part of our culture and our heritage, and therefore I was very happy to be able to launch courses, and Henrik was one of those brave souls who decided to read those courses. I want to acknowledge also Professor Iqbal Singh, another former student. I'm not responsible for them doing so well, you know, they all grew on their own talent, but I had the privilege also of interacting with very, very bright students, and Iqbal was one of my best. And I want to acknowledge all my friends who were kind enough to invite me, Arun Mainan, a mentor whom I've always learned much from, and I'm very glad that, you know, the Tamil Center is collaborating with the Sikh institutions to bring this together. My former colleague and good friend Malminda, Singapore Advisory Board, and Narendra from the National Library, who's given us this wonderful location. So I thank all of them, and of course, the YSA, past, present presidents. I believe I'm still a member of the advisory board, although I've not attended a single meeting yet, but I'm sure you'll be calling on me not too far from here. What do I want to do this evening is to do a quick review of the scholarship, of the research, of the thinking, and what we know of the Sikh community in Singapore. Henrik mentioned my very first book that I published, the Singapore Khalsa Association, which grew out of an honours thesis which I wrote more than 30 years ago. And that was my first foray into studying the Sikh community, and I was very happy to be able to publish that book, which I still see is still available, and people are still asking me about that original sort of entree into studying the Sikhs, and they ask me why. And the first suspicion they had was that I had a Sikh girlfriend. That's not true. My wife is here. She's been my girlfriend since I was an undergraduate. But I said I was just very curious, and I thought that this was a very important community for us to understand. And from that, I went on to do my master's and PhD on the Sikhs in the Punjab, not on the Sikhs in Singapore, but I studied the Punjab. I subsequently did my doctoral dissertation on colonial rule in the Punjab, and then went on to publish on the partition of India. Of course, the Punjab was one of the main provinces affected. The other one was Bengal, and wrote various other things. Of late, I've been venturing away from India and starting to write more on Singapore history. But the two do come together in a sense if you understand how communities grow and evolve in a changing context. And Singapore changes, as we all know, very rapidly. So my work has been on how this impacts local communities and how changes in a larger framework, the state, the global developments, have impact on the way we live and experiences that we go through. So if you apply this to the scholarship on the Sikhs in Singapore, you will see three distinct phases in my view. The first is, of course, the migration of Sikhs to this part of the world, and the stories are of movements, of settlement, of how they became more settled communities, how they adjusted to life in a colony, and how they organized themselves to promote their social, their religious, their cultural interests. So that's the story of the first phase, and the Singapore Khalsa Association, which I wrote about, had some elements of that, but other scholars have also written very good analysis of the kinds of stories which were quite inspiring in many ways, of how the Sikhs, who were part of the British Empire, right, they were in Punjab, they took opportunities offered by the opening of new colonies like Singapore, Malaya, which were then in search of security forces. So the Sikhs, who were recruited by the British as one of those martial races, they were coined by the British. They identified a few groups of people, the Pathans, the Punjabi Muslims, the Nepalis. They were called the martial races, and the Sikhs were one of those. So they featured very prominently in the Indian military, and then when other colonies needed troops, soldiers, policemen, they went in search of the Sikhs. And this opened opportunities for many of the Sikhs to come to this part of the world. So when they came to this part of the world, they started working as policemen. Then some of them who didn't make it to the police force became caretakers, joined the security forces, but others soon followed. There were business people, there were people who came to do small businesses and other services, and that was the origins of the Sikh community in Singapore. Started around the late 19th century, and then they settled. But no, they just didn't come and work and then go back. They settled here, and very soon they started having families here. But the social life had to evolve too. So when they say 5 Sikhs come together, the Panch Pyare, they form a Gurdwara, right? So that's how Gurdwaras then started to evolve. The first one was actually in the Tanjong Pagar dock area, the police stations, and then they started to growing in different parts of Singapore. So the stories of this first phase, and I don't want to spend too much time on this because it's all very well written up already, is about adaptation, is about settlement, is about creating institutions that supported the needs, the social, cultural, and religious needs of the community. Now you must remember that the colonial state adopts what they call a laissez-faire approach. It doesn't interfere, or it doesn't involve itself in the running of the community. All that the colonial state authorities were interested in was law and order, no disturbances, make money. So it left the communities, different communities, to fend for themselves, and that's what the Sikhs did. So this was basically a lot of self-help, adaptation, and basically communities looking after themselves. So you had a Sikh community, but you had different pockets of different groups organizing themselves under, of course, the broad rubric of a Sikh community, but in a way they were functioning quite differently in many ways. So this was the first phase of, if you want, of the Sikh story in Singapore. Now, 1965, Singapore became a nation state. Many of the Sikhs stayed on after the departure of the British. They had sunk roots here. They became part of the local community. Now, we all know about the post-colonial state in Singapore, and that is the desire to build a multicultural, multiracial society. So you had the categories, right, the racial categories, CMIO. Now, the Sikhs, who were a minority with their own distinctive identity, where would they fit? Of course, they were put under the I. But the I includes the Tamils, the Bengalis, the Gujaratis, and others. So this, in a way, posed a challenge for the Sikh community. How were they going to continue defining themselves, the distinctiveness in this very broad category, right? Which was actually part of the state prerogative of nation building. You just wanted to know the building blocks, and then you try to slot people into the building blocks. So being subsumed in this category posed a challenge. And then when mother tongue was one of those policies, Punjabi was not recognized as one of the official languages, right? So the community had to find ways of preserving the use of the language amongst its own young and among its own community, but without the official support in the early days of the state or of the government. So the community, I must say, did well, notwithstanding the fact that they were a minority, and if you want to look at it, they were a minority within a minority. So notwithstanding the small size, Hernick mentioned about 12,000, that's been the figures we've been getting. The census report do not officially define, or rather capture, the actual numbers of Sikhs. I don't know whether they actually do, but I've not seen it reported in the official reports. But roughly 12 to 15,000 is the figure over 3 decades that we know is the size of the Sikh community. So a very small community. And notwithstanding with that, having started as security forces, policemen, jagas, bullock owners, and that sort of thing, the Sikh community flourished. And many of the community members became very prominent members of the armed forces, of the police, civil service, schools, and very prominent businessmen as well. So in a way, the community was able to succeed notwithstanding its size. And part of the reason was because I think it was able to negotiate very effectively with the state, able to position itself as a model minority in a multicultural context. But in return, for the government recognizing the special positions of the Sikhs, their religious institutions, their social institutions, and the place that they had in the tapestry of Singapore. So a lot of this is actually self-help. I mentioned Punjabi. The government will say that, well, it's not going to be one of the official languages, but if you can find your own means and ways, we'll support you in organizing your classes. So you have the Sikh Education Foundation organizing, raising resources, getting some government support to organize Punjabi classes, for instance. So this is a way in which a balance of state support recognition, self-help, was able to serve the overall interests of the Sikhs. The government worked largely through the institutions that were established for many years, right? And one of them is, of course, the Sikh Advisory Board, which has been around during the colonial times. The Sikh Advisory Board was a very important platform or channel, or conduit between the government and the community, because on the one hand, it represented the needs of the community and shared them with the government. On the other hand, it was able to share with the community what national prerogatives were. So I think that balance was struck very nicely. And then, of course, through other national Sikh institutions like the Silat Road Temple or the Central Gurudwara, I think the government was able to work through these institutions with the community to promote cultural identity and support various Sikh events and interests. And in a way, this worked very well for the Sikh community. So what happened was actually there was a confluence of the community's interests with national interests, and these institutions were quite central in facilitating that. So this has accounted for the Sikh community, despite the fact that it is a minority within a minority, able to flourish. So that's the second part of the story. The third part of the story is one where it is still being made, it's still evolving. And I have more questions and answers as I come to this part. And that's the next generation, stroke generations. So moving forward, how would the future generations of Sikhs in Singapore maintain the cultural religious identity as they face a very rapidly changing environment? You know, we talk about the millennials, right? And this was a generation born in the 1980s and the 1990s and now reaching young adulthood in the 200s, 210. So these are the people, I see some of them in the room, right? Now this generation has come of age in an era of globalization, characterized by increased global interconnections and consciousness of multiculturalism. So if you grew up in Singapore, you were imbued with this ethos of multiculturalism and you operate in an environment which was cosmopolitan, which was very different and not homogeneous in many ways. Then you have religious pluralism, because you travel a lot. You don't just stay in Singapore, you see different things, right? And then you have international and national interests, sometimes in a way at odds with each other. More importantly, this is a generation that is more than one generation or more removed from their ancestral roots in the Punjab. So if I looked at the first phase, the first set of migrants who came to Singapore, they settled, they sunk roots, but they kept in touch because they still have in their lived experiences, memories, some experiences of Punjab. But in today's generation, one or two generations removed, how would they have that kind of connections with the ancestral roots? And if that is not there, how do they then retain some of these key elements that will define, I guess, their religious and cultural identity? So here is an interesting tension, right? Because on the one hand, Sikhism is a global religion. You have Sikhs all over the world. So they call it the diaspora. So from the Punjab, they went all over the world, and Sikhs are settled in many parts of the world. And you go to Vancouver, you go to London, you go to Bradford, you go to Southeast Asia, you see Sikh community. So there's a diaspora. But is there a certain coherence amongst the diaspora in the way they think about Sikhism, Sikhi, or just about the whole idea of the religious identity? But yet, the religious identity is not defined by a kind of a global doctrine. It is defined by national kind of prerogatives and priorities and influences. So, a Vancouver Sikh and a Singapore Sikh or a Malaysian Sikh, what do they share in common other than the fact that they call themselves Sikhs? And how do their lived experiences then influence the way they think about the religion? They think about experiences. So what happens, so this is one part, what happens also when a younger generation of Sikhs have very different lived experiences from their parents and grandparents? How do you convey that kind of, in a way, ethos or DNA in ways that cannot be transmuted by external forces that will always work in the everyday life of us as individuals functioning here? I mentioned in my second part of the story that there are always community concerns which through the institutions like the SAB, the Gurdwaras are expressed to the government. But at the core, a person here who's a Sikh is also a Singapore citizen. And as a citizen, you have concerns as a citizen, right? Education, well-being, social progress, material progress. So how do you balance your personal kind of concerns alongside your community concerns? So these are things that I think younger generations of Sikhs will continue to grapple with. More importantly, the medium of transmission will change, and it will change very dramatically. Do you still need to go to the Gurdwara to get transmission of Sikh culture, Sikh religion? Social media, technology, different platforms, arts, literature. How would this come into play at some point in time? So relevancy is a very important thing as well, I think, among younger generations of Sikhs. And I'm not talking just, I think this is not just applicable to the Sikh community, but to all other religions. How do religions evolve through changing contexts to stay relevant and stay connected? I think that's a key. And I think for a minority within a minority, with a religion that has cultural, historical roots in Punjab, having to negotiate the next phase in a global city-state like Singapore will pose special challenges. And I come back to this idea of the global identity of the Sikh. Is there such a thing as a diasporic Sikhism or global Sikhi? Or will these in a way be adapted to national prerogatives? So I guess I do not have the answers to this, but I thought it's worth thinking about. It's worth thinking about how, as the community evolves, these will be the challenges that it will face. So I'm going to end my presentation here, and maybe we can have a discussion. As I said earlier, this idea of learning from one another is important. There may be thoughts, there may be ideas, but the important thing is, how do you keep this thing going and alive? So I think today's thing is the Sikh community today, right? But the Sikh community today derives from a history, from a past. And now the question is then, what is the future? And how will the future derive from today and the past? So on that note, I'm going to end here, and I will be happy to take some questions later on and maybe join the discussion. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Professor Tan. I think there were some things that he said that might have gotten quite a number of us thinking. Thank you for starting your speech by saying that eventually we want to learn from each other in this process of discovery, because I think that underlines what we're trying to do at CSTC as well. And I think for all of us to think about how he brought us through questions such as how did the community hold distinctiveness when they were subsumed into national categories, and to moving on to how they found their place when into the tapestry of Singapore with government recognition and support. And ending off with bringing us to think about the evolution of the community, where he posed questions about how there's a significant coherence, how do they maintain that amongst members of the community despite being global. Thank you so much for that insightful talk, Professor. Right, we will move on now to have a beautiful Gidda performance by Miss Jaslene Kaur Narulla. Gidda is known as a popular women's folk dance in Punjab. It exhibits teasing, fun, and exuberance of the Punjabi life. The dance is derived from the ancient ring dance and is just as energetic as Bhangra. Miss Jaslene Kaur, please.
ਉੱਡਦਾ ਸੰਧੂਰੀ ਜਿਹਾ ਰੰਗ ਜੱਟੀਏ ਲੱਕ ਤੇਰਾ ਪਤਲਾ ਪਤੰਗ ਜੱਟੀਏ ਉੱਡਦਾ ਸੰਧੂਰੀ ਜਿਹਾ ਰੰਗ ਜੱਟੀਏ ਲੁਧਿਆਣੇ ਜਾਮ ਲੱਗਿਆ ਤੇਰਾ ਨਖਰਾ ਰਾਸ ਨਾ ਆਵੇ ਨੀ ਜਿੱਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੂੰ ਨੱਚਦੀ ਪੁੱਤ ਜੱਟ ਦਾ ਬੋਲੀਆਂ ਉਹ ਜੱਟ ਦਾ ਬੋਲੀਆਂ ਪਾਵੇ ਨੀ ਜਿੱਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੂੰ ਨੱਚਦੀ ਪੁੱਤ ਜੱਟ ਦਾ ਬੋਲੀਆਂ ਪਾਵੇ ਨੀ ਜਿੱਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੂੰ ਨੱਚਦੀ ਸ਼ੇਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਮ ਜਪਦੇ ਦੁਬਈ ਵਾਲੇ ਸ਼ੇਖ ਮੇਰਾ ਵੇ ਜੇ ਤੂੰ ਬੋਰ 45 ਵਾਂਗੂ ਘੱਟ ਮਿਲਦਾ ਮਿਲੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਾਂਸ ਨਾ ਕਰੋ ਦੇ ਦਿਲ ਦਾ ਉਹ ਹਿੱਲਦਾ ਜ਼ਮਾਨਾ ਚੱਲੇ ਦੌਰ ਜੱਟੀਆਂ ਸੂਟ ਪਾਉਣ ਲਾਦੀਆਂ ਵੇ ਸ਼ਹਿਰੀ ਯੱਕੀਆਂ ਗੁੱਤ ਸੱਪਣੀ ਪਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਬੰਨੀ ਹੋਈ ਆ ਬਹੁਤੇ ਬਣਦੇ ਜੋ ਅੱਖੜ ਮੈਂ
ਨਖਰੋ ਕੱਟੂ ਤੇਰਾ ਯਾਰ ਫਿਰ ਚਾਰ ਨਖਰੋ ਤੇਰੇ ਉੱਤੋਂ ਦੇਣੀਆਂ ਚ ਮਾਰ ਨਖਰੋ ਪੁੱਤ ਨੂੰ ਨਵੀਆਂ ਤੈਨੂੰ ਰੋਟੀ ਪਾਉਣ ਨੂੰ ਹੋ ਨੱਚਣੀ ਵਾਲੀ ਟੱਕਰਾਂ ਬਣ ਗੋਰੀਏ ਨੀ ਰੈਡੀਆ ਬੰਦੂਕ ਮੇਰੀ ਫੌਜੀ ਪਾਉਣ ਨੂੰ ਹੋ ਨੱਚਣੀ ਵਾਲੀ ਟੱਕਰਾਂ ਬਣ ਗੋਰੀਏ ਨੀ ਰੈਡੀਆ ਬੰਦੂਕ ਮੇਰੀ ਫੌਜੀ ਪਾਉਣ